Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your guide to the whitetail woods. Presented by First Light, creating proven, versatile hunting apparel for the stand, saddle, or blind. First Light, go farther, stay longer. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your guest host, Tony Peterson, and today I'm speaking with Greg Litzinger, who has made a name for himself by killing pressured bucks on public land out east. All right, folks, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, which is brought to you by First Light. And you guessed it, this is definitely not Mark Kenyon's voice. It's your old backup QB, Tony. Mark is actually off in Europe this week, and he's in a little town in Germany called Berghusen, something. Anyway, in that little town in Germany, every single year, men, well, I'm assuming this is only for men, but I could be totally wrong, compete for the best beard and the best mustache. Now, I know Mark has been dreaming of bringing that trophy home for a long time for that mustache, so I hope he has a good showing out there. Now, today, I have a New Jersey bow hunter on named Greg Litzinger. Greg is a die-hard public land hunter who really understands how to deal with pressure and who lives to scout throughout the winter. In fact, that's the key to a lot of his success, and also the topic of much of this episode. Now, even if you never set foot on public land, I think you'll be able to glean some useful insight from Greg because he's as legit as they come in the whitetail space. Greg, how you doing, man?
What's happening?
We have to thank our mutual friend Clint Campbell there over at Truth from the Stand podcast for making this happen. And I reached out to Clint when I was looking for people I'm like, who's the most badass winter scouter you know? And he listed about 20 people, and then he said, or you could just call Greg.
Yeah, Clint's we've become really good friends here these last, I think I was one of his first few guests on his podcast. He was just getting started, and we just he lives like an hour and a half from me. We just formed a good friendship, just a good, not just a hunting friendship, just a friendship all around, he's
a solid dude.
Dude, I get jealous of Clint. He's going to hear this, but that he can put trail cameras out and find monsters. And I'm like, dude, you're finding all these megas. It's like, how do you find these jumbos? He's like, it's a camera. I thought it'd be a good spot. And it's like this giant deer. And I'm like, I'll throw out 20 cameras and get maybe one pope all season. I'm like, I don't know how you do it, man. So I was like, once he kind of figures that out, his kill mode, I guess, gets in kill mode, those deer are in trouble, man. He's got the stuff. He just needs to, tweak a few things, and he's going to be a world beater.
Yeah, he's always on good deer out there in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Now I don't know if people who are listening to this can tell, but you don't sound like a typical Wired to Hunt guest. You sound like you live in a different place. Where are you at right now?
South Jersey.
Yeah, and that's
definitely
wild.
Not North Jersey, South Jersey.
So for somebody who lives in Minnesota and doesn't know the difference, what's the difference? Why do you specify that? Because
in Jersey's three. It's North, Central, and South. And South Jersey, we're relatively flat. We got salt marshes, pine barrens, a lot of ag. Central's more farm, rolling hills. North, you get into the mountains and a little more developed areas, I guess, if you will. A lot of newer traffic in PA. Route 80 runs through there, so you get PA, New York, New Jersey, all kind of meet up there. So there's a influx of different kind of people, I guess. Not in a bad way, but it's different than South Jersey.
You know what? I have to confess something. So I live in the suburbs of the Twin Cities, and people hear that, and all of the time they're like, "Oh, that's the worst. You live in where the riots were and everything." I'm like, no. Do you understand how big the cities are? I'm not in downtown Minneapolis, and I've killed Pope and young bucks on public land 10 minutes from my house. It's not like I'm in city, but yes. When I hear somebody say they're from Jersey, I don't think of anything other than a city. Like, I don't think, because my buddy Tim Kent hunts out there too, and he's always describing it. And like, I have this bias. I've never been there. I have no, you know what I mean? It's like when I had one of my old podcasts, I had a few guests on from the UK, and, you know, nothing sounds dumber than some random Midwestern dude talking about, you know, like the UK, like he understands what it is. I'm like, I don't even really know. Like, I don't even know if I can find this on a map. And then when I hear you talk about Jersey, I'm like, and you know, we were talking on the phone the other day, and you're like, yeah, you know, I hunt public land out here. And I'm like, I have such a skewed view of where you live. And it makes me feel like an asshole, because people do that to me all the time.
Yeah. Well, Jersey, it's a pretty cool state. It's a tough state to live in, you know, as you know, not to be political, but it's a Democrat-run state, and there's some laws that it's just strange to me and foreign to me. But this is where I live. But it's a state that the fishing game to do a good job of setting land aside. When I got into hunting, I'm going to date myself here with this. It's 31 years ago. It's not much public land in South Jersey. There's like the bigger like Pine Barrens, but in Pennsville, where I grew up, everybody hunted one piece basically, Lehigh or Wingate. It was like Army Corps of Engineer type terrain, you know, and reed deer, just big reed deer, big bucks.
How big are those spots that you're talking about?
A couple 100 acres. There'd be Lehigh Road, you know, people that hopefully some listeners here will know that road, but there'd be 15 trucks in Lehigh Road, and it's only maybe a mile long. There'd be 15 people hunting that. And it's like everybody hunted there. It was just where they're in a place you can hunt. And as the years went on, they implemented the antler restrictions in some zones, and the state started buying up some old farms. Farmers were, you know, selling it to the state. So the state bought a lot of, especially in South Jersey, a lot of farms, a lot of big farms. And they started like piecing some things together. And, you know, in a short amount of time, it seemed like the state land grew really quickly. And it was nice for us public land guys, because, you know, it gave us a little room to spread out. And North Jersey, like I said, you got the Northern State Forest, there's Jenny Jump, there's Stoke State Forest, massive blocks of unbroken timber. I mean, huge for a small state. You know, we're the Garden State. So people think New Jersey, they don't think Garden State, but there's a lot of agriculture, a lot of farms, north, central, and south. So you can hunt any type of terrain you want in New Jersey. We have the mountains, we have unbroken, you know, the Pine Barrens, unbroken timber, just sandy soil, big rack bucks, tiny bodies. You know, we got farm deer. I mean, we have salt marsh. You know, you can learn to hunt deer in any type of terrain that a deer exists across the country. You know, it's a good state to learn.
So you said did you start hunting deer on public?
Yeah, I've first, you know, always hunted public. My dad, you know, he was a shift worker at DuPont. You know, he's struggled, family sick, so it's not like we had money to splurge on leases or even like permission. We'd get a few pieces here and there, but basically just wherever we can get in. You know, canoe, mostly canoe. We did a lot of canoe hunting. But yeah, it's the public climber, being use the term mobile hunter. You know, my first climber tree stand was a baker, like my dad's baker, that death trap of a tree
one of the
stand.
widow makers.
Yeah. So I went for, you know, I had the baker tree stand, and it was so heavy. I was tiny when I got into hunting. It was hard for me to climb up more than 10 feet. Like, I was exhausted. And then the log, you know, I had a light hang on with screw-on steps, which we weren't allowed to use, but my dad, we did anyway, because that's what everybody did. And Loggy Bayou climbers, lone wolf climber, lone wolf hang on, and then in the saddles. And that's been, you know, I've been mobile since day one.
You know, I have the exact same kind of origination story. I didn't hunt solely public land when I first started, but we hunted a lot of it, and I was mobile just because we had one stand. Like, you know, it was, you put it up, you took it down, you know, and I remember, you know, when climbers came out, it was like, oh my God, this is going to be the answer to all our problems. And then you take them out, and, you know, those early ones were horrible, but the best we had. So you're like, I'm going to figure out how to make it work.
Was it the Warren and Sweat plywood tree stand? It had like the rubber strap, or the APIs with the chain wrapped in rubber, like the motorcycle chain.
Yep.
Oh, Lord, people don't know how good people just getting into hunting now have. It's a really good time to be a hunter.
Oh my God. I mean, I think, you know, when I started out, I had a I think it was Amaker was the company, and it was, crazy heavy steel stand, chain, like you said, but it's what we had. And then my dad would make stands out of wood, but he would make like a platform that would attach with a chain. So they were like 47 pounds, and they were built like, this is really hard to describe, but they were built like with almost a chamber below them. So the supports and the platform and everything would form like 3/4 of a box almost.
Yeah.
And so you'd knock that top of that stand and it would just echo through the bottom of there. And you're just like, these, they were such pieces of shit. But it's like, if we had spots where we wanted to hang a stand like on a field edge or something and just leave it, like that's what we used. And man, you're right. Like, the way that we can hunt now and the access, I mean, even the clothing we have access now to is like, I know we sound old, but man, hunters today, the advantages are so different, but it seems like it's sort of leveled off with pressure, like if you're not onto something exclusive, it seems like even though we have really, banging equipment now and a lot of advantage that way, it's like, man, if you're not on something that you're paying to hunt, like, the whole thing levels off quite a bit just because you have a lot more pressure out there.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. It's New Jersey, it's one of the most populated states in the region. It's not like you can. I deal with people either from eyeshine, ladder stands, baiting's legal, crossbowing's legal. Like the last 10 years, and like now with technology, cell cameras and all this stuff, I hate calling it the game, but it has completely changed. Changed deer, and it makes it finding a big buck a little more difficult because now everybody has. I've seen more cell cameras this year than I care to even like imagine. Like everybody's running cell cameras, and people that would never hunt, or going into the woods because they're getting a picture of a picture of a deer. Most of them, like I get pictures of people and it's like, wow, that dude's going in at 3 p.m. It gets dark at 5:30. I'm like, man, this isn't like the Midwest. Like it's like, but they see it on YouTube, they see it on TV, like it makes being on big deer on a regular basis very difficult. If you're not in it, like really in it, New Jersey will beat you up, man. Like you got to want it like in a different way than most people. Because you might go months without seeing a good deer, like, or you could be on them, from day one.
Do you have pretty liberal harvest out there? Because when you talk about that and being able to bait public, private, and crossbow legalization, all that stuff, is it just a matter of your state game agency goes, there's only so many places people are even allowed to hunt in this state, and so we need deer killed. Dead.
Yeah. We can kill 5 bucks from September to January.
Have you ever had a year where you killed 5?
3 is the most I've gotten. And it was like where you have seasons where you can't do anything wrong. Like you just walk out in the woods, like, oh, there's a buck. Boom. Like that year I killed 3 of my bucks all from the ground. Oh, wow. The one I killed him. I didn't find him, until after the fact, but he was dead. But so you can kill a lot of bucks if you want. It makes, in some areas, it's not to knock anybody, but if you have a good, like 2 or 3 years ago, I had a lot of great young deer, a lot on camera. I seen them. I was like, man, this is going to be a banger year. And then we had an extreme cold front during like doe day muzzleloader in January. And next year it was like a ghost town. Like all these deer got smoked, because these deer never experienced cold like that. And there's going to be a pile of corn or a cut cornfield. Well, these deer are piling out there to eat, and 200-yard muzzleloader, it's just, you're just picking them off.
Yeah.
And
that's
it's
like
gun clubs, all that stuff. Gun clubs come through. You got a lot of nice young deer. Like I said, not to say anything bad about that. That's hunting is hunting,
Yep.
But if the dude gets excited for a 4-pointer, or a 6-pointer, hey, have at it, man. But you have 10 people, 20 people doing that. Well, you really put a hurting on the next deer herd. I guess the only way you would deal with it would be the extreme weather, the snowfall,
Yep.
Extreme snowfall. You get the winter kill. Well, we have good, shotgun kills. It's like the same thing. Like some spots, it's like, there's just nothing here, and it's like, you got to wait 2 or 3 years to get, some age back in that area.
Yeah. And sometimes it never comes back depending on the pressure. When they say, I was thinking, when the state game agency's like, you know what, how about a $5 limit? That's like saying, how about just shoot unlimited bucks?
Yeah.
I mean, because very few people are going to fill that limit, but they're not going to stop.
Yes, and that's too with like bow and gun, like Jersey. I mean, they make you buy a regular fall bow, and then end of October you have to buy a permit bow, which is another $28 and $28 because you got to buy a permit, and then you got to buy a buck tag, and then a permit for the zone you're hunting. So if you hunt, like I hunt 3 zones, well, for permit bow, it'll cost me $100 to hunt, plus the $28 for the original license. And then if I want a gun hunt, well, there's another $30. If I want a winter bow hunt, there's another $30. So Jersey they'll nickel and dime me to death.
Yeah, they keep you coming back. Have you seen? You kind of alluded to just a high amount of pressure your whole life hunting out there.
Yeah.
Have you seen an uptick in like the last 5 years? Are you seeing more people out there?
I'm seeing more people by boat for sure. A lot of with YouTube and that this generation of hunting, I guess, hunters, they say it, they do it. So crossbow's legal. So we get a lot of gun hunters that are bow hunting now with the crossbow, and a lot of gun hunters come in by boat. Well, now they're going to come in with the crossbow. So a lot of my spots that were good fall are not so good anymore. Yeah. Some of the swamps were it's just not there. It's not worth it to wake up at 2 to catch a tide to go hunt somewhere or paddle, far and walk through this, waist deep swamp for a mediocre buck, if you will. And like you said, it's hit or miss. Like some years it's amazing. Other years you're like out here for like 5 days. I'm like, I ain't seen a deer. I ain't heard them. I ain't smelled them. Like no splashing in the water, and it's like, oh, but that's the way it goes, I guess, anywhere.
Do you feel like, so I'm assuming when you say that you used to do some water access and it worked out pretty well for you. And now, cause I feel the same way, like there used to be some tricks like that you could get away from people, and it feels like there's no secrets left. And I know like if you're listening to this and you hunt out west and you elk hunt or whatever, an over the counter unit, it's the same deal. Like you're not going to outwork the competition. No. Like
there's no hidey, hidey holes, I guess, if you will, anymore. Like everybody's got an aerial map, whatever software you're using, you got up-to-date imaging of as it's happening, so it's like, it's hard to find, those spots that were before you found them by accident. Like, oh, what's this? And 20 years ago, you find a funnel, all those buck signs, you know what it is, you hunt it, you start killing some deer, seeing some deer. And now you look at it, you're like, oh, it's a funnel because you got this, but when you're in it, you don't know what's there. It's like all those buck signs you're hunting, you're killing. Now from aerial photo, like, oh, it's like hunting the mountains, like saddles. So you go to any mountainous terrain, saddles, the easiest thing to pick out. You go to almost every saddle, human sign. Yep. And deer will avoid them, even though it's a good bottleneck, the pinch point, if you will. Deer just avoid them during hunting hours. So bottlenecks around here in farm country and swamps, same way. And these deer are they're really, they're surviving and they're thriving in some areas.
Man, I think, and I love Onyx. I love the tools that we have, but man, the way that sort of leveled things off for people is incredible. I mean, you just think about, we're right in the heart of winter scouting right now. And this is a time when you get in and try to find rubs and figure some of that stuff out. And, you used to just like stumble across a little island in the swamp or something, and you're like, oh man, like this is freaking money. And now anyone, like almost every hunter out there can pull up their phone and find that. And, whether they'll do the work to get in there, but even if only a couple people do, or, like you said, if you wait for that tide to roll in and you go in, you think, man, like not very many people are going to go buy a, $1,000 or $1,500 kayak just for that. Like, no, tons of people do that. That shit's everywhere now.
And it's like, I've last year and even this year, like hunting, I've kind of put my phone in my pocket, and I've gotten away from like trying to find precise pinpoint spots. And I've let just the deer sign and the terrain just go very old school, and I find something, I'll just mark it real quick, and then it kind of makes it fun again, less like less monotonous. I'm just kind of like, I'm almost like still hunting. I'm just following the sign.
Yep.
And I'm finding areas, especially like some of the big woods I'm hunting by here by my house. I'm finding areas that's got zero human pressure, because you look at a map, you're like, there's nothing that's making that, hunters go, ooh, what's this? Deer know that is a spot where people don't go. So deer are like, oh, party over here. And sometimes it might only be 100 yards off a cart road or 50 yards off a cart road. Everybody's just, now with the e-bikes too, we got to deal with the e-bikes. They just blow right on past, and these bucks are just hanging out, watching all these people, and I guess they've probably always done that. But I find that more and more in those overlooked spots and random spots, people just walk past.
Yeah. I find that too, where, if I'm scouting bluffy country or river bottom country with like limited cover or real terrain that's easy to read, it's like everybody's at the same level. But if you get into some of that mono habitat, like big wood stuff, where, an elevation change of 20 feet's a big one. Then when you get into that stuff and everything from overhead kind of looks the same, then you start realizing like the subtlety of deer movement and sign.
Yep.
And I think I'm with you right there too on, like, especially right now when you're winter scouting, I'll pick out spots on X or whatever. And they're like, I'm going to go look at that. But the interesting stuff I find most of the time is between that and something else, just like following a whim.
Yeah. Total. It's not random, because you're using your instincts that we've, honed over the years, but it's those spots that I find my biggest buck sign, like in the big woods by my house. Was it 3 years ago? I stumbled upon like hammer signpost rubs, like 30 of them in this one little block. So I put a bunch of cameras out there, and it's like a big buck would roll through there, but he would never rub on a rub. It was always the little guys. The big bucks knew it was just, these little guys would tear up the rubs, like, big old cedars and everything, like real tall, like nice deer, but the bigger, older bucks would never rub. Some of the bigger bucks don't scrape. They just know that this is a hot spot. For some reason, I still can't figure out why all these rubs are there, because there's no terrain, there's no nothing, there's no edge. It's just a spot I think people don't go. And it's probably been that way for years, because some of these rubs are old, and it's a smack dab in the middle of like nothingness. And it's like, it was by pure accident I found them. Like, I remember it was like, because it's like we had a little bit of snow, and so you can kind of see, and I just seen this rub just like a beacon way out there. I was like, and I love rubs, big rubs, and I seen that, and I was like, I know what that is. And I've been in that piece of woods for the last 15, 20 years. And I'm like, you mark it, it's like, I don't even know what is that. Like, there's nothing, but all the bucks come through there. It's just a weird, strange place, but it's so hard to get to unless I can airdrop from a parachute, like you have to cross so many deer trails and so much laurel and so much briar swamp to get to it. Like, you kind of only get one or two sits. So if it ain't there, it's like you wait for that mid-November, and it's like nothing. But the sign and the some of the trail camera pictures, like, that's the spot to be. It might take me 3 or 4 years to kill a deer there, but that's where I'll be, Yeah.
Dude, I think sometimes, because I think we look at a concentration of rubs like that, to me, that's my favorite thing. Like, if I find lots of rubs in a really tight area, I'm super interested in that. And I think we look at it a lot of times and we sell this like, okay, that's a staging area because they bedded over here and they feed over there. Or, there's like some deer explanation for it. But I think a lot of times, like you're talking about, it's because people aren't there. Yeah. And so you have a whole bunch of bucks who know that's one spot. Yeah. And so I don't know if that's correlated. You bump into a bunch of strangers, if that's correlated to making more sign in that spot just because there's so much like deer scent there. But it makes me wonder, because when you see, like I've got a buddy who owns some land in southwestern Wisconsin, runs cameras on there all year, and he has like brassica plot for a late season hunt, and you get these bucks that you've never seen. Like, they weren't there all fall or summer. And all of a sudden, when, the weather really sucks and they need that food source, you put all these deer who don't really know each other together. And then you're getting, like images like over and over of bucks fighting and testing each other out. Yeah. And I'm like, I wonder if on public land during the season, there's just places where the bucks are like, geez, holy shit. Like I got to get somewhere where people aren't.
Yes.
And all the bucks, maybe not all of them, but a lot of them figure it out. And they're just more prone to being a little more aggressive and making sign. And just because they're all there together.
I firmly believe that. I had a conversation with a guy at the Harrisburg show about rubs, because he's like, I found all these rubs. And I was like, explaining my thoughts on rubs. And we kind of came to the same conclusion. It's just an area that a lot of pressure from all around, and the pressures come from the out, and it's pushing these deer into the center. And most people aren't going to put that work to get in there, especially like in October and November, because it's still a lot of, there's a lot of high stem count stuff still happening in October and November. You can't see very far, limited visibility, but deer, they use all their senses. They have a lot better senses than we do. So they might not see well, but they can smell and hear, So I firmly believe that's what's happening there.
When you talk about some of the stuff that you scout and where you hunt, it reminds me so much of some of the stuff that I hunt in like northern Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. But it also reminds me when you think about a little area you're talking about like that, where maybe you go in and winter scout it now and you're like, man, at some point in the fall, this is where you kill that 130, 140. Yeah. Because of like, the high stem count like you're talking about, and just like the location of it. Then you go do a hunt like in Iowa that we talked about that you said you never wanted to do. And you're like, I want to find that because my instincts tell me find that spot, and it doesn't exist, and it doesn't freaking matter. Like you're looking for something you don't even need, because it's like the only way to get it done in some places, and totally, I wouldn't say irrelevant, but not nearly as important in a place with a, high amount of deer and maybe not the most pressure out there and a lot of like good quality deer. And so it's like, it's weird how different this becomes in the different places that you can hunt.
And there's parts, like I've hunted some private farms in Jersey, and like there's a couple guys I know that hunt Central Jersey, and they kill, hammer deer, but they have 500-600 acres. But the pressure, a couple farms I hunted, the deer behave a lot better than the public. I wouldn't say it's Midwestern like, but the deer come out in fields, they daylight at 4:00 in the afternoon. You're like, what the fuck is this? Like, I'm not used to this. Like hunting field edges and hedgerows, I'm like, it's foreign to me because I don't do it. So I sit in field edges or hedgerows and I feel naked because I'm like, what am I doing out here? There's nothing going to happen. And then 4:00, deer just pile out in the field, and you're like, this really happens. Like it's very TV-ish, if you will. And the pressure area gets extreme pressure, most of them, and you can find some little pockets here and there with no pressure, but these deer have been pressured their whole life. So it don't really take much, for them deer to alter into survival mode, and we have that early season in September, second week, but you have to shoot a doe before you can shoot a buck, which is just earn a buck, they call it. Like I've passed so many good deer, like opening morning, like here comes a hammer. And I'm like, there was a group of does here all week long. Opening morning, here comes the hammer. I'm like, hey, all right, never seen you before. But, it's like a very frustrating time in September. But a lot of people are running cameras. A lot of people are baiting, running minerals. So they're pressuring deer even before the season starts. And I've noticed that change in the last 10 years. I'll say the last 5 years, it's gotten extremely difficult to get on good bucks, without really, blowing them out, because prime example, last year in Delaware, pretty much high pressure area, these bucks were coming out into the field, the bean field, this little pocket, and I had a camera there all summer. And then we decided to go down there and hunt it. And I pulled the camera like after the third day, because we seen some trucks there, so we didn't hunt it. It's a bunch of boot tracks. A guy walked for like 3 days for the season. A hunter walked the edge of the field with his family, walked the beans. The bucks, big old December came in, smelled it, gone. Like, so there was a whole week. Like he was there like for hours on end. Like I got hundreds and hundreds of pictures of this deer in a short time. Like it was his core area. He smelled one human and was out. And all the other smaller bucks still came out, but the two mature ones were like, nope, we're out. So it just took one encounter with a human. And farmers walk that field edge all the time. Like human scent's not foreign to them, but it took a guy that was a little more human scent, probably dipped in the woods a little bit, and that buck was like, deuces. And it was like, never seen him. We hunted him pretty hard, and he just was never to be found again. Didn't, my buddy was hunting there a few times, nothing.
I think
so
that I wish every hunter could learn that lesson quick, because man, there are situations where you can bump them around and they're not that sensitive to it. But when you're dealing with deer that are, it's an eye opener. I had that happen to me. It must have been about 3 years ago in Minnesota on a private farm that I have, where it's like you might kill a good one opening night on a field. Like you just might, because they're not onto it yet. And I had a spot the year before. I killed a really good one opening night. And so I hung a camera there the next year, still alfalfa, like, maybe, right?
Yeah.
And I had quite a few good ones coming out using it, like fighting in the field right by the stand. Like I was like, this is going to happen again, and I should know better because I never do. Lightning never strikes twice for me. Like if I kill a buck here, I might as well write that spot off forever because it's over. Yeah. But I had that camera on video mode, and I went out there and it wasn't a cell camera. I went out there and sat opening night, saw a few does. It was just dead. So I checked the camera, and the day before the season, I had a different hunter walk in there, walking his dog, blasting Motley Crue. Like you can hear the whole thing, and walked in there onto the trail that those bucks come out and hung a camera on it. And he even had his daughter with him, and his daughter said, "Whose camera is that?" Like I heard the whole exchange and just shut it down. I mean, they were just like, we're not using this anymore. Yeah. And I just wish, he could know, like, that impact is like, it's not little, like that can be a really bad deal. And so you think about it, we never look at that for ourselves. Like it's always this dipshit that walks in there that you're like, oh, I hate that guy because he blew my deer out. We never think we're the dipshit, but we are all the time. And the more that you hunt those kind of deer, the more you learn, like your presence is big.
Well, I remember, we grew up, like I said, a long time ago, but reading articles from Miles Keller, like his thought process, like ground scent, and all that stuff. Like ground scent is so important to understand how your scent is, what you're going to set, you're going to leave, like tall grass, short grass, dewy grass. And if a big buck cuts your track, and it's fresh within pressure area, they know of a 2-hour track versus a 2-day-old track, but they know a human was in here and they're usually not here. They're going in survival mode for the most part. Most bucks, there might be a few outliers that just like they're so crafty they don't really bother them. But I think any buck that's been shot at, anytime a hunter stops a buck, that buck knows, like, well, I know what that is, So it's like those moments you're just educating those deer. You going and checking your cameras, or hunting the wrong winds, your ground scent, not paying attention to your entry and exit. It really, you're helping the deer and you're hurting yourself.
Mm-hmm. Do you find, being in a state, New Jersey, it's a little bit weird because a lot of states allow baiting on private but not public, but it's wide open there. Do you see, like with your trail cameras, you go pop a trail camera on a tree, do you see, like, do you get negative reactions on that? Because I know where I hunt in Wisconsin, they can bait, and man, if I put a camera out and those deer blow up on it, like they are not tolerant of it.
Yeah. They, some of the higher end models, like I don't buy high end models anymore because I get a lot stolen. So I buy cheaper ones and they're noisy. There's something going on. There's an audible click. You can barely hear it, or like the red, any camera I got that's red, then deer are onto it. They're spooky, they're cagey, especially video mode because it stays red a long time. You see, especially like older does. Older does are the worst. I mean, they get up to it and they smell it. And, so I try to set my cameras up high, and I do my best to wear rubber gloves and rubber boots when checking cameras. Cause I know, like, especially when it's hot out, you touch your face. I know it's not going to help much, but it does help some, to get your scent up a little bit higher and not to be touchy grabby with the bark, especially mature does in Jersey I think they're harder to hunt than a mature buck because you have her plus her whole, 30 other deer she bred in the last 5 years with her. If she's on to something, all the rest is on to something.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Nobody, we've done episodes on this. I've written about this. Nobody talks about that, how A game does are. Like when you talked about earn a buck there, when I first started hunting Wisconsin, some parts had earn a buck. And man, you want to be reminded that you're not the greatest deer hunter in the world. Have to shoot a doe before you can kill a buck. That can give you like anxiety attacks.
Yeah.
Because it's when all of a sudden, when you're not just like, oh, at any given point in the season, if a doe walks by, I might shoot her. When you're like, I have to target one and I have to make it happen. That's a different deal.
Yeah. It's, I shot this old doe. I had her aged out. She was 8.5, and I hunted her. She had short little stubby legs. I knew it was her, but she was a matriarch, and there was this old wooden stand every time, like falling down. Every time she went by this stand, she would literally rustle her feet in the leaves to get that, because I'm sure when she was a fawn, a yearling, her mom showed her, or a hunter was in there. So she would literally stare at the stand. It's falling down in a tree, but she knew that was danger. So anything that was like horizontal up in the air, she was not having it. And whenever I hunted, she would pick me out. I don't care if I was, 10 feet on the ground or 20. She came in that woodlot. She would just like look around and she would peg me every time. I finally killed her in winter bow, first day of winter bow a few years ago. And she came in blowing. The wind was good. She came in the woodlot blowing. I don't know why, but she was on edge. She came in. I had good ground. Everything was perfect. She was on edge. Like she just knew I was in that woodlot. And she got all the way up to my tree, came right out to the base of the tree. And I'm like, she knows exactly where I'm at. I bounce all around, but she got in that woodlot, and I don't know if she see me like skylighted, in the dark, whatever, but she came right to the base of the tree in the dark and then kind of pulled out, and right at first light, I just let her have it, and it was like the greatest accomplishment as far as like winter bow hunting, or even, she was a big doe, old doe, like teeth, like she had a big infection in her face. She probably would have died. She had like 3 babies in her, but she was probably the toughest deer I've ever hunted. And I specifically targeted her because she beat my ass so many times. I was like, I got to kill you out of sheer principle. Like I can't go out like this.
Well, I mean, think about an 8.5-year-old deer. That's like the equivalent of a 90-year-old person who's never left their town, right? Like they live in a town of 8,000 people and they've never left it their entire life. Like they know everything. What I mean? That deer, it has been out there every day for 8.5 years. Like you're not, you hang a new stand, you hang a new camera, and she walks by, she's going to be aware of that.
Yeah. Yeah. She was, those cagey does are, and they blow up a lot of my good spots, especially like during the rut. Like they have a better sense than I think than bucks, because bucks are love, come November, they're just, love struck, zombie walking, paying attention half the time. But those does are always on alert.
Yeah. I think that's one of the sort of unspoken real challenges of being a public land hunter primarily is, if you get on really badass private land, a lot of those does get a lot of passes. Like they, just like the bucks do, right?
Yeah.
But you get on public land and those deer, even if they're coming into a bait pile and they weren't going to get shot by this guy, the next bait pile, somebody's going to shoot at them. And they spend their whole life on a hit list or everybody's hit list. And that cumulative pressure is real. And you have to beat them if you're going to get a buck. And it's like it's sort of like a throwaway thing we don't really give enough credit to, but it's a big problem for a lot of people.
Yeah. It's, I killed a doe and open a night this year, and I was like, man, this is the year. And I didn't see until like end of October, like September, I was just getting gut punched by the deer. Like I wasn't seeing no bucks. I was like, I got a buck tag for the first time in years, and nope, it was like a ghost town, man. I was like, and I really wasn't even seeing the does. And it was like, man, I just wanted to just shoot something. It was a very difficult season. And all that scouting I did, like the year prior, last couple of years in so many spots, it was like I never even scouted. The sign was not there. The rubs weren't there. The deer weren't there. And I'm kind of curious now because I still have cameras out that I set in like September in some of the spots. Like I just want to go see like if it turned back on, like our season just got over 31st of January. So I'm just starting to start my scouting stuff now. So I'm kind of curious to see where these deer went. And maybe it's food, oaks, different crops, could be pressure, bait piles. I need to figure it out because like I worked on my entry and exits. I did all this, everything that you're supposed to do. And it was like, there's just nothing here. And you feel kind of defeated because you have like, this is the year, everything's going to happen and like nothing. So it's like, I like that because it's like, I got my butt kicked and I love that. I love having that like thrown in my face every time I go out, come home, I'm not seeing a deer. And I'm like, all right.
So
all right.
What
Okay.
is
Like,
your plan then, though? So you come off a season because I think there's a really good lesson there, and a lot of people I'm talking to are like, "Man, I got my ass kicked last year." Like it just happens. But so you've had cameras out there soaking, so you'll get a pretty good glimpse into what was happening through those. It's not going to answer all your questions.
Yeah.
What's your like winter scouting strategy to go? Okay, next year this isn't happening to me. I'm going to be on them more. What are you looking at?
I'm looking for, because like I said, the rub lines and the those rubbing areas, those staging areas weren't there, so they got to be somewhere else, and I need to figure out like where they went. And I do believe it's most likely food or pressure. I got to figure out maybe somebody was coming in from private, because some of the spots it's like you got one trailhead. The only way to get to some of these spots, like you got to park here. There's no other way around it. So maybe somebody's coming in by 4-wheeler. E-bikes. Like I need to figure out what changed from these last couple of years. So for me, it's trying to go back to the drawing board and having like a clean slate. Like, all right, there's nothing here. I grid searched this during hunting season. I didn't find anything. So now I'm going to go here and just like quadrant scout it, because I got kids and wife. So I have little 4-hour blocks on the weekend. So I like to I'm going to scout this 500 acre piece. I'm going to break it up into 4 blocks, and then for, Saturday, Sunday, 2 weeks in a row, I'm going to scout these, up and down, zigzag them, and really, hopefully, either write that place off or see what I need to see. And usually it's pressure and food. Could be somebody with a ladder stand and they could be baiting all summer. Who knows? I have to go find out why it happened.
When you break a property up like that and you talk about winter scouting it, we talk all the time about looking for rubs. If you don't have any snow, you can look for last season scrapes, trails, whatever, the usual. But it sounds like you're looking for a lot of human sign too.
Yes.
And that's like, for me, I know that's like half the battle on public. I'm like, where are the stands? Where are the piles of garbage? Like where are the tack trails? Is that what you're looking for too?
Yes, exactly. I'll go out at night too. Like I'll get out, and it's super early when it's still dark out and look for eye shine. Cause I know, you can go to, see eye shine. Every eye shine I see, I go up and look at it. If it's an old tack, rusty tack, if it's the new triangle shaped one or whatever, square ones. And I know in certain areas where there's never been eye shine, I'm like, well, that's new. I need to see where that's going, and like going in the daytime, you don't know that. So I'll go in at night, late night, early morning, 2 a.m. If I can't sleep, I'll go out in the woods, look for eye shine, near the trailhead and stuff like that. I try to do things that most people won't, because like we talked about earlier, there is no secrets out there, so it's like, there is no secret, trailheads or canoe launches, or anything. Now there's e-bikes, canoes, kayaks. So I just try to go where people aren't. Cause if you're seeing people, you're not seeing big bucks, so you avoid the people. I find you'll start to see more deer sign. And to break it down a little bit further is rub size. If I'm finding a bunch of saplings rubbed all over the place, like little rubs, it's a little dinker. If there's a bunch of them, it's probably a doe group with, it's her first year, so she might be trailing around. So I'm looking for bigger deer sign, taller rubs, away from people, away from human sign.
Do you, so you don't give a whole lot of like credence to small rubs?
On average, no. But sometimes they will. If it's a rub line, yes. But if it's like just, in oaks, you see where there's like rubs and scrapes all over the place. Usually it's just young deer doing that. I'm looking for that isolated big old scrapes, or I just need one big hammer rub to get me excited. Like if I see one good tall rub, and by hammer, I mean, not necessarily diameter, but height. Yep. I want to see time marks up at my chest.
Yep.
That like, all right, there's a wider deer here, or a deer with longer tines. Yep. Because if I'm seeing rubs that are like a foot off the ground, I doesn't necessarily get me excited
Yeah.
unless it's a trail, like a rub line. Like I'll follow them back. I love rub lines because you find some hidden gems, especially big woods. You've hunted it a long time. Like it's hard to follow a rub line. If you can mark it now on your whatever software you're using, and you can kind of see how these deer are moving through different types of terrain. You go back to Google Earth and you look at the time of year, like, oh, he's following this, this soft edge in the mature hardwoods there that you don't necessarily see unless you were actually walking that same rub line that the deer was.
Yep. I mean, I think that's one of the, I've talked about this a lot. Like I'm not a big bed guy. Like, I mean, I like them, whatever, but I don't build a strategy around finding individual beds very often. But man, my favorite winter scouting is in big woods stuff. And if I find that like knob or something where there's like a big buck bed on there, it's like you're going to stand there and spin 360 and you're going to see a rub line going down here to the creek bottom and a rub line and it's like it's like you're talking about with those eye shine. If somebody leaves tack trail out there, it's like, okay, I know exactly where you started, exactly where you ended when you walk into and out of the woods. When you find those situations and you can read that rub line, you're like, that information so valuable.
Yeah. And like I said, I'm primarily a bed guy, especially in like October. Like I have a lot of success hunting a singular bed, but it's always 90% of the time it's the rubs that lead me to that bed. And so it's like,
hold on a second. So when you're winter scouting, you'll find rub concentrations and you'll tie that into finding a bed to hunt in October.
Yes. Yeah. If I find like a rub line, like, you want to see kind of where, like, maybe pull up on a map, like where's it going? Like maybe there's a thicket over there. And I find a lot of beds, believe it or not, by accident, by following deer trails. Like I walk through, I'm like, man, there's really nothing here. You look down, you're standing in a giant, well-worn bed. You're like, I end up here. Like, I don't know how I got there, but you just follow the terrain and the vegetation. And it's like, oh, look, there's a buck bed, and then you sit there, look around, like you said, oh, there's a rub, or, there's, some buck sign over there. There's a big track or something. So I rubs and beds. I'm not a big food guy. I don't have much hunting specific food. I'm trying to get good at deciphering food and different types of bark, but my brain can only handle so much information.
Do you think that partially your strategy, of paying attention to rubs big time and then hunting beds is just built around the fact that you're in a state where, man, when everybody can bait, a food pattern isn't the same thing.
Yes,
like you're not dealing with the same kind of food situation that you would be in a state without bait.
Yeah, it's the first week or two you might get some beans, bucks coming out their beans, but I'm rarely on the field edge. Like it's probably 100 yards. It's probably the closest I'll get to a field edge the first 2 weeks. And even that's a tough sell sometimes, but yeah, the food being food everywhere, prevalent. And so I kind of just adapted to like the bed hunting, because a big buck, he'll get up out of his bed and he won't move very far. Like I've seen, like I've set up on beds. I've watched a buck get up, mill around in his bed, take a few steps, and you're talking there's 45 minutes of light left. He don't move. He just doesn't move till dark.
Yep.
Then it's like, oh, and now I'm stuck in this tree because there's like one trail out of this. Like he's coming my direction. I'm like, well, this is great. I'm gonna be here getting bit up by bugs, because it's like, it's hot, and it's like, and you're losing that game, if you will, because he's going to smell you. You're in his comfort zone. Well, that spot's gone. So I have no problem going to the next. Like I do a lot of scouting. I have a lot of spots, so it's like one spot blows out. I'm like, peace out. I'll go somewhere else.
Is that a function of being a public land hunter? Because I mean, my whole thing about winter scouting is just to give myself options, because I know that even if I'm perfectly careful on a little setup that I really like, it's maybe 2 sits and it's over. Right. And so often, even before I get in there, it's done for whatever reason. It doesn't matter what reason, it's gone. And it's like, you can't get married to any one thing because it's so fleeting.
Yes. It's, I don't have, let's say I'm kind of stubborn, but I don't hold on to spots. Like I'm stubborn for areas, but like a particular tree, nope. If it's not there, like I said, one sit, usually I'm gone, especially in like October, because I get really aggressive, especially in the morning. Like I'm going there usually like come October, every one of my sits, like I'm going to kill, especially in the morning. I love mornings. So a lot of my scouting is devised, to capitalize on the October, the law, I guess is what they call it. So morning sits in October. I have the most success hunting in the morning. I see a lot of big bucks at 7:30 in the morning when most people say they're in bed before dark. Not always,
Not even
so
close.
it's like, a lot of my a lot of my scouting. I mean, all these deer behind me, there's only one that's killed at night. They're all mornings, from 7 to 8 p.m., or 7 to 8 a.m. So a lot of my scouting is for morning setups in October, and then come November, it's just like, it's a free for all. Find the does, you find the bucks, basically.
Is your strategy, find a place where a buck's bed and find an individual bed, and then figure out a way to get in there and beat him back there in the morning in October?
Yes,
man,
exactly.
Nobody talks about that. And so again, I'm gonna go out on a limb here, but I think I'm right. This is probably a function of there's a crazy amount of hunters in around opener. Everybody's running their bait sites. Everybody's excited. And then they go, this isn't that much fun. I'm going to wait until Halloween to really get after it again. And you have that 2 or 3 week window in October on public land where even if your pressure is 50% of what it is at peak, that's a big difference. And then if you think, well, now I'm going to hunt a morning, now you've dropped another 30% of that pressure down. And it's like you can hunt the deer for a couple of weeks.
Yes. I don't say they get less edgy, but I think they know, like I said, the human pressure, because they're born in the pressure. So if you come in and you add pressure, stink, whatever it might be, that buck's not going to run to the next county. He's got nowhere to go. Yep. He's just going to just avoid that area and make a slight change. He's not going to go, 300 yards or a mile away. He's just going to shift his bedding or his route 56 yards sometimes. That's just nuts. That's because sometimes he doesn't have the space to go. And he's not going to go walk through open timber or a field edge. He's going to go to the next available thick cover, which usually it's 50 or 60 yards. It's not very far. So he's adapting to the pressure. He's not like freaking out about it because, it's life, it's business as usual for them. And I think a lot of people get that mixed up. Like if I bumped a buck, he's gone. No, he's gone for a couple of days. He's going to alter his things, especially if he gets out of his bed, like super clean, like his bed worked. He's not going to abandon that. Like you're going to abandon like something that saves your life, basically. No. Yeah. So,
well, I mean, that's the way to look at it, right? Is when you get out there and you're scouting right now, you're looking for those places where they're showing you, I was here and this place gave me some advantages.
Yes.
Even if you stumble through there or a woodcock hunter goes through there or whatever, it's not like they're going to abandon that completely. Because that place gives them advantages, and it's not like if that buck gets killed, another one isn't going to figure that out. Yes. And those kind of situations are so important.
Yes, and like we talked about the ground scent. Walking ground scent is different than like setting a tree stand up and sitting on the ground scent. Like when you're sitting there for long periods of time, like your scent is just saturating everything. And a mature doe or a mature buck, like they know that. Like this human stopped here for a long time. But a walking trail, it's like it's the scent's there, but it's not as perceived as a threat so much. Like they know something's up, they back up a little bit, but they don't get that big whiff of like, oh my God, those humans here, just stinking it up for hours on end. Or a guy that hunts the same tree, 30 times a season. Yep.
Dude, I remember a couple 6-7 years ago, I was hunting Wisconsin, and I was hunting just this chunk of public land. And I had gone in and set up in this spot, and I actually saw quite a few deer off of it. Didn't kill one. Pulled my set out. Next day I was going to go in where I saw these bucks chasing, and it snowed that night. And I remember walking down through there because it was off of this little 2-track, And I walked by the tree that I was in the day before, and there was all these sets of deer tracks in the snow coming up to it.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything left in there, but they're just
Yeah.
like, somebody caught a whiff of it, checked it out, and then you could just see, like, after hours when it was dark, they were like, okay, some asshole was in here. Like, they're aware of this. And I think that stuff happens, dude, all the time.
And then I've told the story a few times. I was hunting the salt marsh and like brackish salt marsh area, and I had this big old buck come in, 2 bucks come in, and it's, earn a buck. So you know how that goes. And he leaves, him and the 7-pointer leave, and then kind of look back, and right here comes a smaller buck coming right to the base of my tree. I mean, he caught my ground scent from way up there, and he came right to my tree. And I'm looking at him. I'm like, man, that big buck's around here somewhere. I'm looking all around. He's back in the shadows looking for humans up in the tree. And we make eye contact, and then he just backs right up in the dark, disappears. He sent that little buck to go die, basically, because I beat him, and he did not want to. He wanted to know who beat him, where he was, and how they got there. And I was like, wow, like, how are you supposed to kill a deer like that? Like, when this deer was old, stiff, like he walked with like arthritis, you're like, he's seen some stuff, man. But that deer, I beat him, and he literally set his best buddy to die, basically. Well, there you go, Bob. See where dangers come from. And he's looking up in trees. So I'm like, that is just unreal. Like, how is that even possible for a prey animal to evolve to that, that level where he wants to know what beat him, and he wants to see him in the tree. Like, he needs to validate that ground scent. Like, and now, like, he probably, went in hiding that, probably became strictly nocturnal at that point.
Dude, I think there's such a good lesson there. And I know people will listen to that and say that's BS. There's no way they can communicate that way. Listen, man, I think the way that they're in tune to each other is we can't even understand it. Have you ever hunted mule deer before?
No.
Man, if you hunt like high country mule deer, where, like your typical like late August Colorado hunt where you're glassing up the big velvet bucks, you'll see those deer. They'll be like a 170 and, 3 or 4 smaller bucks, right?
Yeah.
And, they're bachelored up, but they're in the high country. Those suckers will bed down, and that big buck will be in the best spot, guaranteed. And then there'll be this little sentry buck here on this point and this one here. And you start reading it and you go, they didn't probably like plan that. Like, they're not saying, okay, you bed here, you bed here.
Yeah.
It's just like nature shakes out that way. And it's like this little dude's got this corner. This little dude's got this corner. This dude's above. And it's like, whether it's like intentional or totally just like a survival accident, they're unapproachable.
Yep.
And you go like, it doesn't matter whether they did it on purpose because they beat you already. Yep. And I think that stuff's incredible.
And that's too, with you see that with doe bedding.
Oh, big time.
When you find like doe bedding, they bed a group of does, especially like in the marsh, in the salt marsh, you'll see they bed down in the reeds. It's one's pointed this direction, one's going this way, one's going this way. They're covered a full 360. And it's like, it's ridiculous. It's almost like, like when geese land in the field, you have the feeders and you have the sentries. There's always somebody watching. And I think, like early season, it could be tough, because bucks are grouped up, but you hit that beginning of October, then bucks start to separate, and that's when that big one goes off on his own. And I find it's easier to kill a buck, a single deer, because he just has 2 eyes and 2 ears and 2 noses. You don't have 4 bucks behind him. Everybody, scent's going everywhere. So it's like, or a group of does bedded. So a singular buck in October, he's going from point A to point B. So you find out where he's feeding, find out where he's bedding. Doesn't always work out that way, but he's walking, he's taking his time. Shots are readily available because he's in no hurry to get back to the bed. Back to that 7:30, he's still meandering back to his bed. Like, it's a good time to be in the woods if you understand. I think, if your scouting helps you, break down these areas where they're finding where they're bedding and, getting close. Like, I get super aggressive, and it's like, it's not for everybody. I don't recommend that. There's a lot of times I get busted, when it's dark out, and it's like, well, all this work for nothing. But it's like, well, it worked. He was here. So it's like, it's a win. It's just an hour and a half too late, too soon.
Yep. Well, I think what you're talking about there is an interesting point, because I feel the same way when I love the October low. Like I love middle of October when people say you shouldn't be out there, because I think you get a point where those bucks, like you said, they're not hanging out together generally, and they get confident. Like it's almost like they're overconfident about their safety if they're in a really good spot. You don't see that with does. Does are always kind of neurotic and like they're worried about keeping the little ones alive. But you see bucks, and it's like a weakness I think you can exploit because like you said, you watch that buck bed down, and it's like, you're ticking down to the last couple minutes of shooting light. And, sometimes they get up, sometimes they don't, but a lot of times they do. And it's just like, they're just so confident they're safe there that they'll get up and go make a rub and start working their way down the trail. And they won't be to the field until it's a half hour after dark, but they moved enough for you to kill them. And they just act like they're just king shit. Like they don't have the same kind of danger. And that's when you kill them.
Yeah. And it scares a lot of people because it's, being hunting a particular buck, anybody's hunting a particular buck or mature deer in general, we don't have a lot of mature deer in New Jersey. So there might only be 1 4-year-old, some of the pieces I'm hunting, and a bunch of 2.5-year-olds. If you do all this work, and I've had good access, good entry, good everything was good, and daybreak comes, here comes the spike on the net bed. And it's like, well, all right, like all bucks are using this bed, which is good, like my thought process scouting that piece, like, all right, this is a good spot for a buck to bed. Like it didn't work out for me that time, and that scares a lot of people, getting that aggressive. You're going to scare them away. Man, they ain't going anywhere. They got nowhere to go. Like, where are they going? Hop on a plane and go somewhere else?
I mean, I think we're in a weird place with that kind of mentality right now, though, because, the hunting industry in general sold us this idea that you should be super cautious because that was coming from people who could afford to wait. They didn't have any, didn't do them any good to go in on October 10th when nobody was going to hunt their deer at all. So like, if you're preaching that message, like, well, you shouldn't go in. It's like, well, you shouldn't go in because you don't have to. But if you're hunting a place that's got a lot of pressure, like, and you've scouted a lot, like you might as well strike now. And if you don't make it happen, I mean, that's why you winter scout now. So like when you do blow it up, you just move on to plan B or C or D or whatever.
Yeah. Like I've tagged out in like the first week of October and been like, well, shit, what do I do now? It's like, well, Delaware or Pennsylvania, here I come, because I can't get another buck tag till, the end of October, but it's like, it's cool to tag out early, but at the same time, we're like, it's over. Like, I don't want it to be over. Like, I want to struggle a little bit more, And so it's like, it's a rewarding part of hunting, and I think it was Andre or maybe Dan that talked about, it's not being, you're not being careless or aggressive. You're being calculated in your setup. You're not just like throwing your cautions to the wind. Like, where he's bedded and you're going to come in, and the wind's going to be perfect for him, awful for you. You're like, you're that razor's edge and you're going like, but it's not aggressive. It's very tactical and very thought out, because that's the only time you're going to get a chance to that deer, because it's, once October, Halloween hits, that buck's, berserker mode, running here, there, everywhere. So I love that October. I love scouting for October, and like, I think most of my winter scouting is for those October moments. It's just like,
when you're focusing on rubs, when you're winter scouting now, I mean, I think there's sort of a misconception if you go out and just find a place like you were talking about that's just ripped up and you're like, man, they were here. This wasn't just one buck. This was, and they're good ones. I think people go out, in February, March, whatever, and they see that and they go, man, I'm getting here on November 3rd and I'm sitting all day. And I look at that and I go, why don't you get there on like October 20th and kill them? And it could be because of that wild card of when the ruts, even really the pre-ruts, like kicking in, that concentration of sign might not really matter that much that you found in March.
That's funny you said October 20th. That is my day. I've killed 5 or 6 bucks on October 20th. And that is the trail camera data and my visual sight. That is the day to be in the woods. 18th to the 21st. It's a lot of day walking. A lot of big bucks are on their feet. Maybe they're just checking the scene out, see where the food is, the does are, the human pressure is. and they go back in hiding. Maybe they get lucky, find a hot doe, but I think they get up, and that urge to breed and to know what's going on. They can't be super secretive. They have to, because I think older bucks want to breed one or two times, maybe three times, and like they're good. That's enough for them because they've been through enough seasons where it's survival.
Yep.
They've been shot at, they've been hit, maybe wounded. They're not going to run, like a 2-year-old all over the woods chasing one or two, and some of these bucks is going to retreat back to safety, security.
Yep. Well, I think that's a really good thing to acknowledge, because when you look at how often we kind of talk about this stuff, I think people don't associate. They just think, okay, I'm going to winter scout, and it's just a general plus, a general benefit for me in the fall. It's like, I don't know. I mean, finding rubs, a concentration of rubs right now in the woods probably doesn't do you that much good on opening night next year. Maybe not for the first opening week because of all the people who might be out there, whatever. But when those deer get into that, like, okay, I know I'm getting hunted. I know I still want to do my thing, but like you're talking with those bucks, I'm not going to be running all over the place. I'm not showing myself in daylight out in the fields. That's the connection here. Like there's like a March to October connection that's like so beneficial. And I think people kind of just like, they don't understand that it's not just a general seasonal benefit. It's just like maybe 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, but it's real important.
Yeah. And scout with a purpose. If your vacation is November, you're going to Iowa, and if you get a chance to scout Iowa, whatever, it's like, I'm going to take a week off in November. Rubs should not be on your list. You should be mark them. It's cool. You found them, but you should be focused on, is those rubs near doe bedding, and vice versa. So like I said, I purposely, most of my scouting is for October, it's just, and I think the reason for that, when I first started hunting, you had to apply for a permit to hunt November. Well, you weren't guaranteed a permit. Well, I think my first 2 or 3 seasons, I didn't get November. My dad did. So I just had October.
Yep. And
I had to wait till gun season, a week in December, and then nothing until January. So there are a few years not pulling tags, getting a permit. I got 4 weeks to kill something. So it's like you get in that mode where it's like, this is it. I have to make these 3 or 4 weeks count. And it's just like, it's just kind of compounded through the years over that, and then as you get older, jobs, like no vacation time. So it's like, well, come November, it's dark by the time I get off work, but not October. So it's like, I kind of just did the October thing because that's what I had. So it's like, I'm the worst rut hunter. Anybody tell you, talk to Clint, Johnny, I've already killed maybe 3 bucks in November, maybe 4. I'm an October guy. Yeah. So it's like, I scout for October.
I'm the same way. I mean, I've killed some bucks in November, but I'm way more successful in September and October. And I should say this, if you get out there scouting right now, it's not like there isn't a rut benefit to it. I mean, you might find a pinch point or a fence crossing or something, a river crossing, whatever. You might find a terrain trap where you're like, yep, this is a November 7th spot. But like, you got to know what you're looking at, right? Like that concentration of rubs might not be the November 7th spot.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Understanding that but again, the more miles you put on and you find that stuff, the more you have those options as your season progresses. And it's such an advantage.
And I remember either reading or hearing like Andy May talk about that, those rubs, when those rubs pop up at a certain time of year, these rubs going to get hot, and if you have a quick access, you can check at them like that buck's in here for only 3 or 4 days, and that's when those rubs are kind of, they're hopping off. So you need to be there when it happens. Maybe it's the 20th of October, maybe it's the 26th of October, but you have to get out and check those big rub spots and be ready to hunt when you're out there. Because sometimes you can't see it from the road. Like you got to be in there. So all right, I'm going to go hunt this. And hopefully they're there. If not there, all right, give it a 3-day and come back in 3 days, and you try to play that, that 3-day, I do believe 3-day windows is key, because that buck will be here for a few days and he's gone for a few days and come back for a few days. And there's on a cycle, like hunting the big mountain bucks. It's just a constant cycle. Here in Jersey, it's just a smaller cycle because they don't have the ability to roam as far.
Yep. I mean, I think, when you talk about Andy and he's talking about that, like you got that window there, it might be a couple days here, or, you're talking about hunting in mid-October when other people aren't. I think like maybe the most important lesson there from guys like you and Andy is you have to go out and learn when your stuff's going to be good. Or when it could potentially be good. Like if you're listening to a whole bunch of people in the hunting industry and they're telling you got to do this, you got to do that, and this is the best time, there might be some good stuff in there, right? Like there might be, but like your specific spot and all of these little variables that factor in there, like, okay, well, you're in Jersey. There's people can shoot $5, people can bait, people can do this, people can do that, people can crossbow hunt. It's like, okay, you filter all that stuff down through there. Now what do you have to do to be successful? Got to scout a lot. You got to find new spots a lot. Like you got to put in the work, and you could follow all the advice from a bunch of hunting industry people and it wouldn't do you any good because your situation does not mirror theirs in any way. And, like I had a conversation this morning. Giannis and I are both applying to Iowa together. He wants to come out and hunt Iowa, and we have enough points to maybe draw. And he's like, well, we got to do this in November, right? And I was like, I'm going in October. And he's like, well, that's the best option for me travel wise. But he's like, how do you think it's going to be? I'm like, it's going to be freaking amazing. We're going to be all over deer, and we're going to be there before, cause we're going to be hunting public land if we draw.
Yes.
And I'm like, even though it's Iowa, I know on November 1, there'll be the most people in the woods that there will be all season long for the next 14 days. I want to get in there ahead of that when those bucks are starting to move a little bit and they're laying down sign, and everybody else is like, I'm waiting 2 more weeks or a week and a half to kill them. I can't freaking wait.
Yeah. And he said, you got to know your strengths, like some people are better November hunters. Like I can see does, but I don't hunt does. So it's like come November, like I have a hard time shifting to doe mode because September, October, it's like, especially October, it's bucks only. Like I always say, if you're seeing 4 or 5 pointers, 6 pointers, you ain't seeing the big buck because he's completely separate from all those. If you're seeing a bunch of does in October, odds are you're not seeing a buck. So it's like I get in so buck mode, and then like the rut comes, it's like I can't turn it off. It's a very hard switch. And it's like these last couple of years, I've gotten better at it, but I built a 10-year stretch. I didn't think I drew my bow back in November. And it was like, because I was strictly was so buck obsessed. Like I forgot it's like, oh, it's the rut. And all my buddies are drunk, hungover, or just driving down the road, see a buck chasing down, go kill it. I'm getting up early. I'm taking canoe in or taking a long way around and just getting my buck kicked because I didn't know how to I understood how November worked, but I couldn't get out of my own way with I was so fixated on mature buck beds and rubs. And it's like, so you need to know how your brain works and use that to your advantage. Like, don't necessarily play to your weaknesses. Like if you're a November guy, go all in November, man. Like you get it. If you're a September guy, got the food sources, go all in, play to your strengths when you're scouting.
But I do think, because I'm not, I've talked about this a ton, but, I live in Minnesota. Our gun season starts the first Saturday of November every year. So I think this year it's like November 4th or 5th. So, you got 500,000 gun hunters out there and the rut's just barely cranking. And so I was always September and October because I never had a rut hunt to count on. And I found, people say, well, hunt the doe bedding areas, hunt downwind of those doe bedding areas, whatever. For me to get over that rut hump, because like people are like, oh, it's the best time. It's like always going to be the best. And then you go and actually hunt it. And a lot of times it really sucks, especially on public land. It's like not nearly as good as it's supposed to be. I think it's a matter of being like good enough scouting to find some terrain traps you believe in, and then having the willingness to be bored off your ass and disappointed and sit them and at least give give a couple of them real dark to dark sits if the wind is working for you. And just because I've noticed this, like some of the bigger bucks I've killed in the rut, they might be like the only deer I see that day. Or I might see like 2 deer or 3 deer, but the right one comes along, but you might have 8 hours where you don't see a deer or 2 days. And that's tough, man.
Dude, I firmly believe in that. When I see a lot of deer in November with daybreak, if I've seen a bunch of does, it's always little bucks behind. And then between 11 and 2, there'll be a singular buck that rolls through. Like very rarely, especially in November, I don't have much luck seeing big bucks early in the morning. Like it's a rarity, it's unless they're with a doe. Like I don't get that chasing or that, that what everybody wants. I rarely get that. I get that 11 to 2, 11 to 3, that single buck coming through and nose to the ground. And it's a tough, I was at full draw 4 times this year. and no shots because it's thick. It's like everything, my scouting, all that stuff works, but that buck was just moving too fast, too thick. And I'm like, well, I got a bow. I don't have a gun, so it's like these deer are like 20 yards and under and they're walking because, well, I'm not shooting through, a sticker bush at a walking deer.
Yeah.
I've been down that road before. It doesn't pay well.
Not a good idea. Yeah. I have the same experience with bucks at 10, 11, 12, like early in the afternoon where you'll see the first deer and he's cruising through and you're like,
Yeah.
It reminds me of, I bow hunt turkeys a lot. And, if you're out there early season, here in Minnesota, it'll be mid-April when it opens, Nebraska will be early or whatever. But when you get them like flocked up, they're all roosting together, they're all feeding together, you have a million gobbles, doesn't matter. You're not calling them away. And then like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, they start cruising and you'll pick that bird up, that 2-year-old or 3-year-old. It's like, I got to go looking. It feels exactly like a lot of rut hunts where you're like, yeah, there might've been a bunch of action right away. But like you said, a lot of times it's not that 140. It's like scrappers and does. And then you get that die off and then you're like, oh man, like this, I haven't seen anything in 3 hours. And then all of a sudden you see them come and you're like, there's something to it. Like they got sick of the does they were with, or they gave up on it. And now they're like, I got to go to that next concentration. And that's when you kill them.
Yeah. It's, I think, similarities between fishing and hunting and turkey hunting and hunting different things. I think there is a common core, a thread between all of them. Like I used to fish for stripers a lot in Cape May, and you hunt the rips and you hunt points, and these big fish are down low, even though you got a big tail and they're super strong swimmers, they're using, the terrain to their advantage to, everything comes to them, and then it's like trout fishing. You watch a big trout sitting behind a rock. He's in that position, because it's advantageous to him to be in that position. I can eat easily, it's like hunting turkeys and deer is like, it's very similar. If you're good at one, you can be good at a lot of different forms of hunting and or fishing.
Dude, I talk about that and I write about that all the time. I don't know if anybody believes me or not, but I think any time you spend out there hunting and fishing, you're learning how to be a better hunter or fisherman. Like,
yes.
I mean, the parallels there. I mean, the things that I learn about deer from pheasant hunting public land are amazing. Like it's like a weird little education every time you go. And it's just because you're out there with them.
Mm-hmm. And it's, it's just, there's so many, like, I learned how to hunt mountains and the terrain, how deer use terrain from hunting, fishing streams, smallmouth streams, and hunting big reservoirs and the points where the big bass hide and they go, up and down, these points. I learned how to hunt the mountains. I learned how to hunt mountains and have success pretty quickly, and I'm 3 hours away from the nearest set of mountains. So it's like, I went up there and was like, it's just like fishing, and it's like, there's the correlation is identical. And it's like, it just mountain hunting clicked for me. It was like, I find it relatively easy, because deer can only travel so many ways in the mountains, and I got that from fishing, years of fishing. I fished every day. So when you're fishing, if you're really a good fisherman, you're learning, watch what water does, what insects do, like how human pressure changes fish, changes the bite, when it's a clear lake, heavy pressure, fish go deep. There's heavy pressure with deer or humans. Where do deer go? They usually go deep. There's a lot of, a lot of similarities between the two.
Yeah, I was literally talking to my daughters about this. We were having breakfast the other morning, and I don't remember how it came up, but we fish all the freaking time. We love to fish smallies, and they like to hunt with me. And we were talking about just like why we like doing stuff in the outdoors. And I think it came up because we were talking about training dogs. But anyway, I really think one of the ways that makes you, like, if somebody's listening to this and they just started deer hunting and they're like, there's no way if I fish smallies, I'm going to get better at deer hunting. But you got to think about, what are you doing when you're fishing smallies or you're trout fishing, fly fishing trout? You're just solving a problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're taking a set of conditions that were handed to you. Okay, the water's high. It's this color. It's May 15th. They should be on beds, but maybe they're not or whatever. And you start breaking it down. You go, okay, where should they be? Is it a Saturday at 2:00 and they've already been, thrown to 5,000 times, or is it a Tuesday morning? Is it July and there's a cold front, or is it, you know what I mean? Like you start to factor in that stuff and it's like, okay, now you just, you're literally reading the weather and the quarry and the conditions and the pressure and everything. And you're going, okay, what's my best chance? How is that any different than when you walk into public land? You're like, I got to kill a deer. What are you filtering through your brain right there? Okay, well, it's cloudy. Exactly. It's been cold for 4 days. It's Wednesday morning. It's not Saturday night. Like you know what I mean? It's like, I think that you just partially get better because you're getting good at solving those problems.
Yes. Agreed. I mean, 100%.
And I think that's why I don't know. I just think there's a lot of benefits to getting out there and doing a bunch of different stuff. We're about done here, buddy. I got to ask you, do you see, I always wrestle with this because, I put together all this content on winter scouting and, shed hunting is a little different. A lot of people seem to shed hunt now. Do you ever do you run across people out there winter scouting? Like if you had to just ballpark it and I say, okay, take any 10 bow hunters out in Jersey, what percentage, how many of those dudes winter scout? What would you say?
I'd say everyone will say they do, but I rarely see people in February.
What do you think the real number is?
Out of 10, I would say me and someone else. So 2.
Yeah. I was going to say,
I'll say actually, like most people are pulling their trail cameras. Yeah. That's where their scouting ends. They're pulling the cameras. Like I'm getting in the habit of leaving cameras out. Like I don't really pull some of my cameras like March because I want to see, like I'll go put new batters in and check for people. So if I know like, oh, this dude's been in here like 4 days in a row. He either found the banger set of sheds and he's trying to figure this deer out, or he's seen a big deer and he's trying to find the shed. So I'm like, well, this dude's on something. So, all right, maybe I need to go in there and search a little bit more. It's like maybe I didn't get that near my camera, but if you catch somebody going into a spot a bunch of times, there's a reason they're in there.
Yep. So you say maybe 20% of the people. I would say maybe 20% too. Like I wouldn't go much higher than that. I kind of look at it like all day sits. Everybody talks about it. I don't think that many hunters actually do very many all day sits.
All day sits are brutal.
You know what?
Brutal.
I don't know if this is because I have kids now or what. I actually don't mind them that much. If it's not, if the conditions aren't horrible. But what? So I want to wrap this up then. So you say we're in agreement here on 20% of the people might winter scout. Some people are out there shed hunting, like you said. Some people are out there looking for trail cameras. How important is winter scouting to you, to your fall success? Like 1, not important at all. 10, it's my favorite thing because it always helps me kill big bucks.
10.
Yeah.
10, 11, 12, 100. Like
if everybody who's listening to this, maybe the most important thing we covered is just that right there. Not very many people do this, and guys who are absolute killers go out, and this is the time when they set the stage for those kills.
Yes, agreed.
Majorly important. Thank you so much for coming on, man. This has been a blast. I'm definitely going to get you on again.
Oh, sweet. I enjoyed it.
Thanks, buddy.
Later.
That's it for this week, folks. Be sure to tune in next week for more whitetail goodness. This has been the Wired to Hunt podcast, and I've been your guest host, Tony Peterson. As always, thank you so much for listening. And if you're looking for more whitetail content, be sure to check out themeateater.com/wired. And you'll see a pile of new articles each week by Mark, myself, a whole slew of whitetail addicts. Or you can head over to the Wired to Hunt YouTube channel to view the weekly content that we put up.